Appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who are taking the time during your lunch to join us today. Yes, today's webinar is on categorizing your files with Vault. So I wanted to make this kind of a basic or beginners or an intro to categories. So if you're familiar with them, hopefully you'll pick up on some things. And if you're new to categories or you're using Vault Basic, which doesn't have a categories function, you'd be able to use these life cycles and categories to your benefit. Categories. Their benefits. Categories are a powerful method of not only classifying different types of files or folders, but automatically assigning other behaviors. Combined with rules, as users add new files to the Vault, lifecycle definitions and states, revision schemes and revision levels, and specify properties can be automatically assigned to the files. This ensures a very high level of both consistency and completeness to the data. On one level, categories are a very simple way of grouping different files or folders based on how your company creates, uses, and manages those files or folders. A very common example is that of files created by CAD applications and those created by word processing and graphics applications. Historically and functionally, the process for creating and releasing a set of models and drawings that represent a product or component has been very different than supporting documentation such as specifications and graphics used by marketing and sales. The CAD-generated files often go through a more formal, multi-step review and change process, whereas the supporting documentation can be managed in a simpler work-in-progress or released fashion. Categories give you the flexibility to categorize the files or folders in a way that best suits your organization. So with categories, you can visually identify different types of file groupings or purposes, assign one or more lifecycle states based on the category, and specify the default lifecycle definition or state for a new or migrated file. Assign one or more revisions based on the category and specify also the default revision scheme and initial revision for a new or migrated file. And finally, you can also assign a set of existing properties or metadata to the file based on the category. Before we can effectively use categories, we have to define and configure lifecycle definitions. A lifecycle definition is an engine that can be configured to automatically assign security, behaviors, and properties to Vault objects based on where the object is in the life of the design process. This functionality enables you to streamline your work environment by removing the overhead involved in managing groups of files, custom objects, or an entire project. There are several steps to fully configure a lifecycle definition. And you can see in the graphic here, there's a lifecycle definition graphic that I created called standard process. So the steps are defined above. First, you got to create the lifecycle definition, give it a name such as standard process like we see here. We also then define the lifecycle states. And these are the file transitions, the transitions that the files will go through in their lifetime. And you can see we've got a lifecycle state of development, then one of manufacturing, and then out of production in this example. The next step would be to create groups. These are used to define access for users. So we put users in groups so that we can better control who has access to what. The next step is to configure lifecycle security. We enable state-based security, which means we assign a user or group the ability to perform an action. And then finally, we configure transitions. There are three considerations dealing with the ability for a lifecycle state to be changed or transitioned to another state. The first one is criteria. Are there property considerations governing the state transition? The second one is actions. What actions, if any, should be performed when making the state transition? And then finally, security. Which user or groups are permitted the ability to transition from one state to the next? So this is a prerequisite in setting up your categories, is defining the lifecycle definition and states and understanding and setting up the transitions so that the files, when categorized, behave properly. So when we get this all set up, then we can reap the benefits. Once we complete the lifecycle definition, we create the file categories, we apply the categories to the files, and then we see that the Vault then applies the criteria defined to the files, and we're able to work effectively in the Vault. So that's a nutshell how this process works, and what we're going to show today in the live demo is the setup of some categories, the definition of a new life cycle and states, and then we'll see that in play. So let's switch over here to Vault. And by the way, I'm using Autodesk Vault Professional. When it comes to the life cycle states and being able to change your files, states and revisions and things, that is a function of Vault Workgroup and Vault Professional, and we're going to look at it through Vault Professional today. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of note here, we've got a project explorer, we've got some designs. If we kind of explore here, we can see that we've got some assemblies. I'm using these ASCA data set, so you can see different files that I've got here, and they're grouped in assemblies. We've got images, part files, and so you can see the different parts within the environment here. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go up to the Tools, Administration, and Global Settings. So in Global Settings, in what you'll notice in my presentation today, some things I've got set up a little bit ahead of time just because of our time constraints. So what we want to look at is we want to look at users first of all. Users, what I've done is I've created some users. I've got Ed Engineer, and I've got Mike Manufacturing, and Sally Sales, and I've got Adam Administrator. So those are users that I've created in the Vault that we're going to use, and we're going to put them in some groups today so that we can control the access that they have. So I'm going to go here to Groups, and you can see that I've already created an Administrators group. If I double click on that, Adam is a member of the Administrators group. And same thing for Manufacturing. What I've done for Manufacturing is giving Document Editor Level 2 and Document Manager Level 2 roles, and applied them to the ASTI Vault, and then added Mike Manufacturer to the Manufacturing group, and so on. So the same thing for Sales. Okay, Sally belongs to the Sales group. Now I'm going to just create one more group, and that's Engineering. And again, I'll give roles, Document Editor Level 2, Document Manager Level 2, and then I'll apply the Vault, and then I'll add the member who belongs to that group, and that's Ed Engineer. So I've completed my group setup, so now I'm controlling who belongs to what group, and thereby in our lifecycle state definitions and transitions, we'll be able to define by groups who can do what. So I'll click Close, and then I'm going to go back into Administration and go into Vault Settings, and we're going to be working in the Behaviors tab today. And the first thing I want to do is I want to establish a lifecycle definition. So remember, this is that prerequisite we talked about before being able to use the categories or set any additional categories up. I want to establish lifecycle definition. So in the lifecycle definitions, you'll see that there are some out-of-the-box pre-configured lifecycle definitions, one called basic release process, flexible release, simple release, and so on. And you'll see that as each one is selected, down below there are lifecycle states that are defined for each one of those. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to define a new lifecycle definition, and we're going to create lifecycle states. So we're also going to use we'll be using the simple release process for some of our Office documents today. So the process is this: we're going to click New to create the new definition, and the name is going to be Standard Process. And Company Standard Process is going to be our description. Now, what I need to do next is I need to add my lifecycle states. So I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to create a state called Development. And for the development state, that is when my files are in design development. So I give that description. Then I'll add the next state, which is going to be manufacturing. And this is for release to designs. And finally, out of production. And that's going to be for archive designs. So this is a really simple lifecycle definition and very simple lifecycle states that I've set up to hopefully make it easy to set up and work with this. You can be as complex as whatever your processes are and set up many more states if you want. Once I have defined those lifecycle states, I need to click Apply before I can do anything else. You'll notice that all of these are in blue, so I need to click Apply to define those, and now they're fully defined. So the next thing I need to do is I need to define with each of these states that I have here, I need to define their lifecycle security. So I'm going to use the Security tab, and I'm going to start with development. I've highlighted development. I go to the Security tab, and I'm going to uncheck No State-Based Security. And now I'm going to click and I'm going to add. And here's where I'm going to select those from those groups that I created. And I'm going to select, and I'll use a Shift Select and select all of my groups. And so they become available to me here. And so what I need to do is for development, in other words, when a file is in design, who has access, who can see it, who can do whatever to it. So under administrators, I'm going to give administrators the ability to read, modify, and delete. And then I'm going to go to engineering. And for engineering, I'm going to give them the same ability. They need to be able to, well, when the file's in development, to be able to do anything to it. And then for manufacturing, I'm going to select manufacturing, and I'm going to deny manufacturing access to files that are in development. We don't want them to be seeing those files in development. They don't need to have access to them, so we're going to deny that access. So the next step is to go ahead and finish that configuration for each of the others. So I'm just going to go through and review, make sure I've got those set up. Sales, engineering. I'm just going to click Apply while I'm in there, and then come down to manufacturing, and again go through that same process of switching to the groups, selecting the groups so that they're in the security for the manufacturing. So when a design is released, what do we want to do? So for administrators, we want them to be able to read and modify, and we'll deny the delete. For engineering, again, we'll allow them to read, but in that state, when it's a release design, we don't want them to be able to modify from that state. They're going to have to change the state in order to do that. And then manufacturing, again, they can read, but they can't make the changes. And sales, they can read, but can't make any changes, so I'll apply that. Finally, I'm going to go to out of production to finish this up. Go to groups, select all my groups, and again, start with administrators. And this is when the file is in the archived state, meaning it's out of, it's done, it's no longer in use in our system. So we're going to give administrators the ability to read, but we'll deny the modify and delete. And then everybody else is not even going to see it. So each one of these other groups we're going to deny. So we'll deny those and we click apply. Okay, so we've created that security, so we now have established who can see what in which lifecycle state. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure the transitions. There are 3 lifecycle states that we have here, and therefore there are 6 possible transitions that can occur. So we can look at transitions here, and you can see that between the 3 we basically have 6 different transitions. Some of the transitions aren't permitted by anyone, and so we'll go ahead and configure those first. So we're going to select the development state, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to select from development to out of production. And we're going to go ahead and edit that. And when it comes to security, we're going to again remove the restrictions, and we're going to add, but we're going to select everyone, because remember, we're going to deny everyone this ability. So we're going to change from allow to deny. Okay, so nobody can take it out of development and put it into out of production and archive it. And then we're going to select the out of production state, and we're going to select out of production back to manufacturing. And again, we'll select the security there, we'll add, we'll select everyone, and we'll take that away. All right, so 2 more settings we need to change in here. We need to select development again, and this time we're going to select manufacturing back to development. So with manufacturing back to development, we're going to go to security, and this time we're going to go ahead and select from our groups. We're going to add them in, and then what we're going to do is administrators are going to be allowed to move it from manufacturing back to development. Manufacturing is not going to be allowed, sales is not going to be allowed, but engineering will be allowed. Okay, so we set that state up. And then the last one here, manufacturing, we want to go ahead and select manufacturing to out of production. And again, we'll select our groups. And then for this one, administrators will be allowed to take it from manufacturing and put it out of production, and everybody else, not going to let them be able to do that. Okay, so now we have set up our transition security. So who can do what, who can apply a transition to a file. And so the next thing we want to do is we want to establish the transition criteria. Criteria means that Vault is going to look and see if criteria is compliant or configured properly before it goes ahead and makes that transition. So while the manufacturing is still selected, and we're going to select development back to manufacturing. So this is when we're going to take it out of development and into manufacturing. What is the criteria that we want to establish? So the criteria is going to be, we want a property compliance. So we're going to come down here and we're going to select property compliance, and we want to select that it is compliant. We're going to add. Okay, so that's the only criteria that we need to establish. And so the next thing we want to do is configure action. So while we're still got this development to manufacturing open, I'm going to come over here and click on the action. What property is it that I want it to check to see if it's compliant? And the action is that I want to check that dependent child files are released. So that's going to be the action, and that's going to be the criteria that we want it to check. Okay, so basically before we go sending say an assembly to manufacturing, we want Inventor to check to make sure that all of the dependent child files are released. Okay, so and let's see. Now we want to select manufacturing to development, and let's take a look at our actions here. So this is going back from manufacturing. We've got a change that's going to come. We want to go back and put it back into development and make that change. This is when we're going to tell Vault to bump the primary revision. And we click OK, and that's our transition. The final step is to go ahead and specify which of our the control of our states. So the only one we need to apply the control to is manufacturing. That control that we want to tell Vault is that that's a released state. So what that does is that secures that file for us too in our Vault backups. When we go to, if we need to purge our database, those released state files are never going to purge. They're going to stay there. So those are milestones. And so we need to make sure that we define that that's a released state. And that also puts that into a state where the members of the other groups, such as manufacturing and sales, can view those files. Because remember, in development, they can't view them. So we'll put that also as the released state there. And I'll click Apply to that. Okay, so Lifecycle Definition is complete. I'll click OK. We'll scroll down here. We'll see there it is. The standard process is defined, development, manufacturing, and out of production. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'll just click, I'll click Close. And notice that the default state here is development. So when I use a category to change a file to the standard process lifecycle definition, it's going to automatically go to the development lifecycle state. Coming back to the Behaviors tab, the Vault settings, the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and look at my categories. So one of the things that you can notice here in the configure categories is that we have different things that we can categorize. We got custom objects, that's a Vault Pro only. Also have file categories, folder categories, and item categories. That's another Vault Pro only. So we're going to switch over to file categories, and you can see that there's already some predefined categories here. So such as engineering. So I'm just going to click edit just so you can kind of see what's there. It's just given a name, category engineering, data created for design purposes is the description, and of course it's made available. I can customize the color or whatever. So in order to create a new category, you would just click the new button, give the new category name, color, and description, and it would show up here in the list. So you can, again, this is something you can be as detailed or as simplistic as you want in your process. So if you wanted to create more than just engineering, but you wanted to create different categories or subcategories, would call them, within engineering. Maybe you want to specifically just call out IPT files separately, or assembly files different, or DWG files. You can do that. You can get as complex as you want. So one of the things that we have done is we created that new lifecycle definition. Well, if we look at the category of engineering, one of the things that we were able to do is then specify a lifecycle and revisions and properties to that category. And the one that's already established out of the box is this flexible release process. Well, I want to assign it to the lifecycle definition we just created. So I'm going to click Assign, and you can see there's standard process, the one we created. I'm going to click Add, and I'll just double click to make it the default. And maybe I want to leave these other two in here so that later on if I needed to change a file to another lifecycle definition, I could, or maybe if I want to take long lead time out, I can remove it and just leave those two in. So that's, again, customizable to your standards and practices. So standard process is going to be the default for the lifecycle. And of course the revision is the standard alphabetic format, and I'll just leave that as it is. If I wanted to assign a new one that I had created, then anything that I created as far as a revision scheme would be in this list as well. So I'll just click cancel there. So categories, my categories are set that I'm going to use for right now. I'm just going to use engineering and office. Engineering is going to be for my CAD files, and office is going to be for supporting documentation such as images and PDFs and Word documents and such. So I'll go ahead and close this file here, and I'm going to be back in the Vault settings, and now I want to look at rules. So I'm going to look at rules, and you'll notice again I've got some just kind of pre-set up simply because of time constraints. And so I've put in a rule for a GIF picture. Any GIF picture that I add to the Vault is automatically going to be assigned as an office category. JPEG, same thing. PNG, PDF, video files, Excel, CSV. So all those are going to get an office category assignment. And then we're going to go back and take a look at that in just a minute, the office category as well. So I've got some categories already here for engineering, inventor assemblies, presentation files, inventor drawings. You can see for an inventor drawing, file extension is IDW, AutoCAD, file extension is DWG. I'm going to go ahead and create one more. I don't have an inventor part here. So I'll create a new rule for an inventor part. Okay, and so an inventor part file, when I create it, is going to take on the engineering category. And what do I want? I want file extension as the property that I'm looking for. And the file extension is going to be is, and it's IPT. So I click Add, and then, so any inventor part IPT file is going to be given category base assignment, and I need to click this Apply Rules on Object Creation. If I do that, then as files are added to the Vault, those rules can be automatically applied. I'll click OK here. So I've created my life cycles, I've created categories, I've got rules. Let's go back and look at this category office. I'm thinking we were going to look at that. So the office documents, or the office category, is using this simple release process. So I want to click Edit here, and I'm going to come down here and look at that simple release process. And one of the things that's interesting here is the default for this is work in progress. Well, because in my situation, in this example, I just want to put all supporting documentation, just release it immediately. So what I can do is come up here and edit, and just double click on released, or click selected and click the check mark, and change that to the default for that simple release process. So now those files will be released automatically, and I'll click close. So here I've got engineering is going to be the standard process, and office is going to be using the simple release process. Okay, so I think we're done here. So now let's go through and let's take a look at some files. I'm going to go ahead and log out of Vault real quick. I was logged in as administrator. I need to log in as Ed, who is in engineering. And when Ed logs in, under designs, we'll just take a look at parts. You can see Ed can see the parts and can take any number of parts, all of them or any number of them, and can select change category. So I'm going to change the category to engineering, and you can see that that's going to be the next category in the dialog box, and I can click OK. And when I do, you can see that over here in this is the category glyph column that changes to a blue icon, and if I hover over it, it says engineering. What it automatically did based on the lifecycle states and definitions that we created, put it into a state of development and gave it its first revision letter of A. So really cool that I can just that easily control the lifecycle state and the revision simply by changing the category. And this is the beauty and the power of the categories, is to be able to change that. Now what's also neat is I'm going to go ahead and log out and log back in, and I'm going to log in as Sally. She's from sales. And we'll take a look at the Vault through Sally's login. So Sally comes in and she'll just go ahead and look at the parts as well. And you'll notice Sally can see these other parts, and the reason is because they're not categorized. So they're just using the default rules set by Vault. And this is what we call a base file. It's given the category of base. So anytime there's like a file migration or something, it's just going to be, unless a rule is applied, given that default category of base. So she can see all those, but you'll notice that she doesn't see any files that are in development. So she's not able to see those, and the same thing with Mike from manufacturing. Mike doesn't need to have access to files in development, so he cannot see them. So we'll go to parts, and again, Mike can see some files that have the base category, but not files that are in development. So let's log out, and log back in as Ed. We'll go back to engineering. And again, through Ed's view, Ed can see those files that are in development. And of course, he can select them, he can preview them, he can see the history, show all the versions, what's happened, know who did what, where, when, and why at this point. And he can take that file and he can come up here and click Change State. So if he changes state, he can change from development to manufacturing. Basically going to release this file to manufacturing. You can enter a comment. Okay. And now you see in the dialog here that the next state will be manufacturing. So lifecycle state is manufacturing, revision is still A. We haven't done anything but release the file, so it's still got the same revision. And let's just go ahead and log out. We'll log back in, this time as Mike. And take a look at Mike's view. So Mike's in manufacturing, he's got to know what part he's got to build next. He comes into there and he sees, there's my part that I need that's released to manufacturing. So ideally, if I had gone through and selected all these other components, all these other parts, and changed their category to engineering and left them in development, this would be the only file that Mike sees. But you can see, so he sees that file, it's in manufacturing. He knows that that's a file he needs to start producing. Same thing with sales. excuse me, Sally and her login would not be able to see files in development, only those in manufacturing. So let's, in our scenario, take a look at this file and decide that there's got to be a change made to this file. So we're going to take this file and we're going to change the state, and let me log in as log out here and log in as Ed. You'll notice that Mike was not able to make that change here. So let's go here and look at Ed's view. And this is in manufacturing. We want to change the state and go back to development. So Ed Engineering, he's allowed to take this back into development. So he's going to change it. This is going to be the next state is development. And he can enter a comment for that. When he clicks OK, it goes back to development, and then based on the rules that we established, we have a new revision. So if you look here in the history, we have our file that was released to manufacturing, and then as revision B is it's back to development. So we've bumped the primary revision to B, it's back in development, and again, that takes it away from Mike and Sally's view and anybody else who doesn't have access to development. So we'll just take a look at Sally once again. Take a look at her view in the vault, go down to parts here, and you see that she does not see that files that are in development. So great way to be able to control the visibility of what's going on in Vault, who did what, where, when, why, how, and who has access to do it. We want to be able to control who can do what. Remember when we were logged in as Mike, we couldn't change back to development. That's something he can't do. So, you know, in another webinar, we could probably cover that kind of thing where we would create an ECO process and establish changes that way. But Ed has the ability to change that back to development. Let's take a look at a couple of other, like these images here. Here's some JPEGs. So I can select those and I can change category, and we'll change those to Office. Okay, so when we do, notice the difference. It's using that simple release process, and it automatically puts them in the default state, which is released. So those files automatically, when the category is changed, become released files. And the beauty there is that, you know, Sally's going to have access to those because those files are released. Okay, and there they are. They're released, so she can view those files. So again, getting a little more in depth, you can see the beauty of the control that you can have, but getting a little more in depth, you may want to create a separate lifecycle definition for your office that allows Sally in purchasing or sales to see these files whether they're in development or released. So you can establish those lifecycle definitions for the different types of documents. So that might be a consideration there, is to take the Office category or lifecycle definition that Office is using, that simple release process, maybe create a new one for those Office where then we control who has access when. So in those cases, we would give sales access whether they're in development or release, because they're maybe working on documents that are part of the, but they're obviously non-CAD files, but they need to be able to work on them in a work in progress state. So again, maybe setting up a new lifecycle definition for them to be able to do that kind of thing. So depends on who they are, what group they're associated with, and how, how you want them to access those files in the Vault. So that's my presentation today. I hope you got a lot out of it. Trevor, turn it over to you if there's any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dave, for that presentation. We did have a couple of questions that actually came into play during the presentation, one of which was a question we get quite often, which is Vault Professional included with Inventor Professional? And the answer is no. Vault is a separate package altogether from Inventor Pro, but it does have an integration such that if you're checking in and checking out files from the Vault, there is a toolbar and a workspace inside of Inventor, so you're not opening up two separate screens and able to check in and check out your files. So I'm going to open it up to some additional questions, and while we're waiting for those questions, I did want to kind of clarify for the audience that we heard the term manufacturing quite a bit, and yes, this product was originally designed and tailored towards an AutoCAD and Inventor workflow for manufacturers, but this is a product that has a Revit integration with it. It does have the ability also to connect with Buzzsaw, so you can share files outside of the firewall. And as I see the audience that we have today, we've got civil people, we've got people that are in architecture and construction. This is a tool set that is good for any of those environments, because at the end of the day, we all create files, we all revise files, and at the very core, Vault is a good source, and I call it a single source of truth, actually, for standardizing the way that files are shared within your organization and backed up and cleaned up as well. So we did receive a question. The question is it advisable to start with Vault Workgroup to get things set up and then, as dollars allow, migrate to Vault Pro? That is a good first step. I would say that when you look at the other advantages of Vault Pro, it's probably a better idea to go ahead and commit to Vault Pro up front. That way you're saving the time in migrating the database from Workgroup to Pro. Would you not agree, Dave?
I completely agree. If you're looking for it obviously depends on the functionality you're looking for. If you're looking for the Vault Pro functionality, but you're thinking maybe I'll start off at Vault Workgroup to kind of get up to speed, I wouldn't recommend that. I would just recommend going to Vault Pro, because what you can do is implement this Vault in stages, if you will. I mean, if you're saying, I'm not really ready to do life cycle changes yet, I just really need a check-in, check-out process. Well, you can still use Vault Pro for that. Then when you're ready, then it's just a matter of saying, what we typically recommend is creating what we call a sandbox vault, and using that sandbox vault to test out your lifecycle definitions and your categories on some dumb data that's non-production data. You test it out in that sandbox vault, and then you go like, yeah, this is the process that we want to implement. This is what we want to do, and then you can go through and do that in the live vault. So I recommend going with the Vault Pro as opposed to going Vault Workgroup. So yeah.
Okay, good answer. And for the person who asked the question, I just sent over a list comparing the differences between Vault Basic, Workgroup, and Pro. It's very easy to find on the internet. If you do a Google search for Vault Basic versus Vault Pro Matrix, it'll be the first topic that should come up in Google. And on the Autodesk.com products page, there is a comparison chart where you can see the different functionalities from Basic up to Pro. Okay, any other questions? Oh, I got one right here, I'm sorry. Does Vault play well with Inventor files with extensive tables for multiple assemblies and parts? That's for you, Dave.
Multiple tables. Read it to me one more time.
Extensive tables for multiple assemblies and parts. I parts or I assemblies, rather.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, Vault is there's a YouTube channel out there called The Vault Knows All, and and that's because it's no joke. The Vault is what keeps track of your data. The Vault knows where everything is. One of the beauties of the Vault is that once I have my data uploaded to the Vault, here we've got assemblies. If I click on this assembly here, okay, I can look at it and see what files it uses. And there's all the files. But those files aren't all in this one directory. They're all over these folders in the Vault. So what's great is Vault knows where it is. I can right-click on that file, say, go to folder, and it takes me to that folder. See, that folder was in frame_000. Vault knows where that is. Well, if I decide that I want to move that entire folder or any of those files within the Vault, create a new folder and move them, I can do that, and Vault will maintain the relationship back to the assembly. So that's the beauty. The Vault knows all. So it knows where everything is, and as far as your supporting documentation, like your tables, if you're using Excel spreadsheets and things like that, Vault manages and tracks those files as well. A Vault installation even includes an Office integration. So if I were to come up here and go to Word and create a new document, notice that there is, well, it's gone today. Where's my Vault? I had a Vault integration in here. Don't know what happened to it, but there will be a Vault toolbar just like there is in your CAD programs in Office. So there's an Office integration. Don't know why it's not there, but it's there. So there's that integration as well. And so from Office, you can check in documents to the Vault as well.
Okay, we have another question. How difficult is it to take something that exists already and use it to make something new, sort of a save-as process? And I think what the questioner is referring to is the copy design functionality in Vault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vault is the way to do it. If you're trying to like make a copy of a design outside of Vault, then it's a very painstaking process. You are having to create a new folder somewhere, and in that folder, copy files over, and then try to reestablish the correct relationships that you want to the new files, and it's a painstaking and error-prone process. So Vault is beautiful and can handle that for you. So we can take like this assembly, and I can right-click and select Copy Design. So in Copy Design, it's going to take that assembly file, but also here are all the parts. And I can say, well, let me right-click and let me copy to. Maybe I want to put this in a different directory than where it currently is. Right now, it's in Assemblies. Maybe I want to create a new folder. I can do it right from here, and maybe I'm just going to give it some kind of a project folder name. You can see it's got a little new asterisk, so it's going to create that new folder and copy that assembly file to that folder. So what you can see here in the actions, you can see copy, it's copying IAM. If I click on the reuse, all of these other files are going to be reused. Well, if in the case for this design, maybe I want to take all of those and they also need to be copied, so I can do that. I can shift select all of those and also do a copy to and put those in that folder as well. So I've got a couple of sub files here that didn't get copied, but you can see what it's doing too is it's giving this name copy of, right? So it's automatically coming up with a naming scheme for these, and these two guys right here, take those guys and copy them too as well and put them there. So now you can see out of the reuse folder, nothing's being reused, everything's being copied, and it's being copied too. So now what I can do is I can choose to use a numbering scheme if I want to, if there's a numbering scheme, or I can simply come over here and select my files. I want to do a shift select and right click. I can set my values for the prefix. So instead of being copy of, I can just leave it blank. Let's just click OK there so you can see it blanks it out. And then I can set the value for, let's say, a postfix and just call it new or X or whatever I wanted to call it, maybe a dash new, and click OK, and you can see there's the postfix, and now each one of those components now would have a new name with the new appended to it. So so I can do that, and then once everything's established, you can see it's going to create the new folder, and there's the new files, gives the names. Once I do that, I just click create copy, and Inventor takes care of all the heavy work. I mean, excuse me, Vault. Vault takes care of the heavy work, not Inventor. So then I just close out of that, and now you see I've got this new folder, and here's my new parts, my new assemblies. They're not there. Somebody probably saw what I did with them. I probably didn't put them there. But anyway, they go into the new, and Vault takes care of that heavy work for you. So there's also, just real quick, I wanted to iterate this, Trevor, real quick, is the copy design is also a standalone utility. So if I can find it here in my data management here, it's in here somewhere. I'm still not used to Windows 8. I just upgraded from Windows 7, so I'm still not used to this. But there's a standalone copy design tool that you can use as a standalone tool. So yeah, let Vault do that heavy work for you, and it will create those copies of those designs and maintain all those new relationships for you.
Okay, we've got one more final question here. I think we can take the other one offline. Question is, I think this is a yes or no actually. Is there a way to create projects within Vault or keep multiple project files separated from one another?
Yes. So what you can do, if we take a look at this assembly, like this file here, this assembly file, maybe we want to take this assembly, and instead of having all these files in separate directories, what we can do is create a project folder, and we can create a link. So real quick, if I come back up here to where we were earlier in the Vault settings, and I go to behaviors, and I go to categories, there are folder categories, and out of the box there's a regular folder, but there's also a project folder. So I can create a project folder, and in that project folder I can do what we call create a link. So I'm going to go ahead and in Designs create a new folder, and I'm going to make it a project folder, and I'm just going to call it, because I don't have any other thing ready to go, Project A. We'll just call it Project A. So here is Project A. The folder looks a little bit different, helping you differentiate that. So I'll come back up here to Assemblies, and I'll take that that file there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand all these so I can highlight all these files that are part of this assembly. And I'll shift select those. And I'll come up here to Edit, and I'll click Copy. And after it's copied, I'll come over here to that project file, and I'll do a Paste as Link. So I'm not actually moving the files, I'm just creating a link. And you'll notice what happens is the file changes. It's got a little square icon down the bottom with a little link to it. So what I can do now is all the files for that project are now listed in that one folder, making it very easy for me to control that project and everything from it. Now, the files that we do operations on are still in their base location. So this 200 won this assembly, you can see it's still here. So any change I make to project A, if I take that one here and let's just take this file here and change the category to engineering. Okay, notice I've got all child files selected. Okay, so it's going to change all of them to engineering. I'll let it do that, and it goes through and makes the change. And let's see who I'm logged in as. Logged in as Sally. So let's go back as Ed. So we can see Ed's view. So there's project A, and look, it's all engineering in development, revision A, and it's a link. So now if I go over here to my assemblies, there it is. There, you're actually performing that to the base file, but you're doing it all from within a single project folder, making life zen, all right? Hope that answered your question.